It is my absolute honor to introduce what I'm calling our pioneer families. These are the families that paved the road, so to speak, for what we get to now enjoy. So we very much are very indebted to this incredible group of people. There are many others who are part of this pioneer group. This is just a very small group that we have invited up tonight to share a few words. So I'm so happy to introduce Dr. Graham and his wife Michele, Dr. Beresford and his wife Theresa, LeeAnn Corkery, and last but not least, Anne Sheridan. So it's my pleasure to facilitate this panel, and we're going to begin with a very soft question. What brought you to Wayside?
And Sheridan brought me to Wayside. That lovely Irish woman showed up at our door on Bobolink Court in Peterborough, and she said, "You don't really know me too much. I don't think you know me at all, but I'm here because I'm told you're the sort of person that I should invite to this meeting." And Anne and her late husband John, extremely important, not just in the early days, but in those days, like oak trees. So that's the first invitation that we had. It was like in the Gospels, come and see. So we did.
Yes, it was Anne who made the initial invite. But the reason I went to the meeting personally is because I wasn't sure what we'd need. We didn't have school-age children at the time, although I was teaching, so I heard plenty of stories about teaching life. But I had a sense, I guess, that we should explore what's possible. And those early sessions that were town hall meeting style sessions were just exploratory. What other form of schooling can we offer children in this area? It wasn't necessarily for a specific thing or against a specific thing, or it was just, what can we do? And it took some months before we determined that we should be a school, because we did explore the option of either becoming a homeschooling cooperative or some other formats, but that's what we came to. David, do you remember that?
So I guess for me, it's I didn't realize you can't start a school.
My husband and we never set out to start a school. We just, from the beginning of our marriage, took our marriage well seriously, and really, I was a recent revert to my cradle Catholic faith, and he was a devout practicing Catholic, and I realized how much I didn't know, and I didn't want our children to grow up knowing as little as I did. So we read and studied and learned that as a married couple that we were the primary educators of our children, and I was a teacher in several school systems in 2 provinces, and when I was pregnant with our first child, the reality of the responsibility really struck me, and so we began to just read and research and pray and seek out like-minded people, and then God put all these other lovely people and many other people who are not in this room on our path, and of course we just began talking, and then I knew Donald from Teachers College, and Kathy Fox Graham, and many other illustrious people. And Dave was a childhood friend of my husband's, so they were lucky that Theresa and I got along. And then I had the honor of meeting Anne Sheridan at a homeschooling conference at the Oratory at Holy Family in Toronto. And many other people from this community were at that same conference, and the rest is history. That was providential. So that's a longer answer, sorry.
Okay. I hope you'll all excuse the Irish accent, more amplified on the microphone, which I haven't sat in front of the microphone for a very long time. Anyway, my story is, and my son's story, of course, I got married and came to Canada 40 years ago. A year and a half later, I gave birth to one son. I never did have any other children. Regrettably, I would like to have had it. The fact of the matter is that I was too old. Anyway, as my son grew up, I knew he would have to go to school. So I started him in junior kindergarten in the local parochial school. He did junior and senior kindergarten. And because I didn't really know anything about the education system in Ontario, I went to every parent-teacher meeting. For 2 years, I became more and more disillusioned because everybody, all the parents, all the teachers, they were concerned about the playground equipment, the three-legged race, the cross-country race, baseball, soccer, hockey, everything except Catholic education. And I thought, there's something radically wrong here. There was a Confederation of Parent-Teacher Associations in Ontario, held a meeting in a hotel in Toronto. I decided I was going. And somebody said to me, why don't you apply to the board and we will fund you? Excuse me. So I applied to the board. Not only did they fund me to go to the meeting, they paid for my hotel and everything else for the weekend. And I thought, if you only knew why I was here, you wouldn't give me a penny. Anyway, I was totally disillusioned after that. Then I went to a Human Life International conference in Ottawa in April '92. And I heard the term homeschooling for the first time. And I remember thinking, I couldn't homeschool, I'm not a teacher. I was a nurse, by the way, but I wasn't a teacher. So the woman who was there gave me a lecture because she owned a homeschooling outfit that provided all the necessary curriculum materials. She caught me by the shoulders and she said, if you don't homeschool your child, she said, you are risking his immortal soul. And I thought, wow. So I began to pray about it, and within a couple of weeks I got my answer in the form of the homeschooling newsletter from this outfit, which was Our Lady of the Rosary Homeschool from Kentucky. So I thought, that's my answer, I have to homeschool. So I whipped him out of school after senior kindergarten, and I began to homeschool him. And because he was a child who had no company his own age, and needed company, craved company, I thought, I can't do this to him. So I went to a homeschooling conference in Toronto where I met LeeAnn and Chris and Theresa and Dale and a couple of other families who are no longer living here. And so I kept in touch with them, and we began to homeschool our children all together on a Friday morning in Assumption Hall. And that went on for several months. And again, I thought, this can't continue. So my husband and I talked it over, and I said, we've got to have our own school. So I started floating the idea of creating a school, a Catholic school. So we met with a lot of obstacles from some people. There was one man in particular who came to our first meeting, which was held on the 7th of June, 1993. He had been a board member with the Catholic School Board here in Peterborough, and he said, what do you want another school for? There's already a very good Catholic school in existence. I thought, yeah, but you don't have anybody in it right now. Anyway, to make a long story short, my dear husband, to whom I give all the accolades, I'm not looking for any accolades for this at all, but I give it all to my late husband, because he put his money where my mouth was. And so we started looking for premises that we could turn into a school. And I tried several other places, I won't go into the details, and finally we were able to rent the basement of the church hall at Assumption. My husband and the other fathers got together, got the materials, and transferred a bare basement into 3 classrooms, a little office for the teachers, and a lunch area for the children. And we were there for, I guess, 10 years or more. We paid $700 a month rent, which of course we couldn't afford. In the first year of Wayside's existence, I looked after the books and the money and all of that stuff and sent the thank you notes and all to anyone who contributed. And by April of that year, there wasn't enough money to pay the 2 teachers till the end of June. So I sent out a dear friend of Wayside Academy letter. And like Mother Angelica, I got back exactly what we needed to take us to the end of the first school year. So thereby hangs a tale. We had regular fundraising ventures, and several people contributed to those. And my son was there from grade 3, grade 2 to grade 6. We had several hiccups along the way, needless to say, where you have personalities, good people involved, but personalities get in the way. And of course, if you're doing anything for God's sake, or for the sake of His Blessed Mother, the devil is always in the details. I don't have to tell any of you that. So eventually I had to take my son out in grade 6. The rest of his schooling I sent him elsewhere. But thank God, as a result of Wayside and his subsequent schooling, he has ended up being a very faithful young Catholic man. He actually married Dave and Theresa's daughter, Sally. They were in school together, and if you look at the album with the photographs of the original classes in Wayside, Sally and Brendan are there in the picture. He's all glasses and teeth, standing in the back row, and Sally is beautiful and blonde, standing in the front row. They didn't decide that time to get married, but they did get married 10 years last June, and they're expecting their 5th baby in January. And thank God the children are all being homeschooled, and I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. In fact, this book that I have in my lap, I kept the original notes at the start of Wayside in that. And some time ago, before they were married actually, I was leafing through it, and if I hadn't recognised my own writing, I wouldn't have believed that I had written it. I had written a whole page on how we wanted our son to turn out. And I remember thinking as I was writing it, he'll be 28 or 9 before I know if this would come to pass. Well, it did come to pass, and I wanted to read it at his wedding, but he wouldn't let me. Very modest, like his mother. Anyway, that's the origins of Wayside Academy, of the very first meeting. And we went on to have further meetings, of course. I liaised with a whole lot of people who had started similar schools, mostly teachers and the director in Northmount School in Toronto. I made several trips up and down to Northmount. I spent months on the phone to other people in Ottawa. And eventually, it was determined, of course, we realised that we would need spiritual direction. And one of our board members had a brother who at that stage was a seminarian with the Legionaries of Christ, and managed to get us a priest from the Legion who came regularly to give us spiritual direction. That priest is currently a pastor in Texas. So it went from there. It wasn't without its hiccups, some major hiccups. But 30 years later, I didn't think it would have lasted 30 weeks, never mind 30 years. And for that, I'm eternally grateful to God and to His Blessed Mother. And by the way, if any of you know the prayer to Our Lady of the Wayside, which I don't ever remember a time when I didn't know it, my mother taught us. And I had that prayer done in calligraphy with some artwork. It's hanging to the left-hand side of the altar in the school chapel. And that was done by 2 ladies in the northwest of Ireland, in County Donegal. And if you ever remove the back, don't remove the back of it. Their names and everything are in there. And that's been hanging there ever since the school started. So that's it for me.
I was going to say, are you going to read the Brendan letter here? I was like, well, listen, you can think about that. So many of us in the room are parents. I want to actually start with LeeAnn, if you'd be willing to answer this question. What advice would you give to this generation of parents who are raising children who desire to keep their children in the faith?
That's a big question, and big questions deserve little answers. On the spot, I would say, if I want to speak from personal experience, have dinner together and sit for long periods around the dinner table, even if the homework doesn't get done. Conversation with mom and dad and siblings around the table, and whatever other guests happen to come to your home. Grandparents, our grandparents are a huge part of our life. And I want to say, grandparents were a huge part of all of the early families, and I think continue to be the families at Wayside. Grandparents and extended family played a huge role. Because it does take a village, the right kind of village, to raise your family. Have dinner together, read out loud, read out loud. We had a morning book on the go that I read out loud and my husband read out loud every evening. And even if we only prayed around the table, we read out loud and have dinner together.
Thank you. We have two university professors on the panel. Dr. Grant is a professor of theology, and Dr. Beresford, forgive me, it's science, correct?
Yeah.
So at Wayside, we are a classical school, so we embrace the great books, we embrace Latin, we embrace an approach to sacred music. As university professors, why do you think the classical approach to education is an important one today?
Good question.
There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, and we'll hear more about that probably for the rest of our lives. But the thing that doesn't change is the question about what does it mean to be a human being? And many things that are going to happen and are happening technologically seem to be a challenge to that. So classical education, founded on the wisdom flowing from Rome, Jerusalem, and Athens, has entertained that question in a variety of ways in difficult situations for thousands of years, and provided answers that are tried and true, and that even if we have to adapt to face something going into the future with our faith flowing through that wisdom, can draw very deeply on something that is going to be a tremendous resource in terms of understanding what it means to be made in God's image and likeness as creatures who are capable and made for love, who are able to know, who find our meaning and purpose together in a shared endeavor to help build the kingdom of God. And that type of education is, especially when it's put in the context of the faith, and in a sense is like a light inside that lamp. It illumines it, and it will be something that will continue to be a light in the darkness. So that's what I would say.
Beautiful. Dr. Beresford?
Well, classical education is based on human beings, and that hasn't changed. So that's still relevant, and classical education has lasted for 1,000 years because it works with human beings, and that hasn't changed. We're in a modern experiment that's only about 80 years old of trying to turn our schools into places where you learn how to be a good employee. And there's more to life than being a good employee. There's nothing wrong with being a good employee, it's better than being a bad employee, but you still have to be able to think. And so it's the thinking part that's most important. I could teach someone all the computer skills they'll ever need in about a day and a half. And in fact, probably less. But you can't teach how to think. So to do that, you need probably an order of importance. Tied for first place, phys ed and music. Second place, art. Third, how to read. And then you can know everything else. I think, and the realization first hit me that nobody in Australia studies Canadian history. Now that doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means that all these other subjects are just subjects. But first you need to be able to know how to read and how to learn how to think. And then all the other subjects are at your fingertips, whether you took them or not.
Thank you. So we're celebrating 30 years here today. What is one thing that you hope 30 years from now, based on the founding principles of Wayside, what's a founding principle that you hope is still present in 30 years? Okay, David, Dr. Beresford.
that the students will read books with hard covers.
I think about the powerful moments that we experienced when our own children were enrolled at the school and we were involved as a community. And I think music is a language that spans time and generations. And you might remember the name Russell Braun. When Russell Braun came to Peterborough, he was at invitation of the gentleman who was directing music at the time. And he's a tenor with the Canadian Opera Company. And he came to our little hall, our little rented hall at the Assumption Parish. And the children's choir sang for him and with him. And a lot of us adults came that day just to witness the whole thing. And it was a really powerful moment. He was moved to tears that day because, not because these kids were superstars and there was such great, acumen in their technical ability. It was the quality of the music, and it was being given to another generation to pass on, to live, experience, and pass on. So Russell Braun was a powerful moment, and I think that classical music, part of classical Christian, I think it's paramount.
Anyone else care to contribute to this question? You're welcome. Oh, please.
I think the Marian principle of the school, it's dedicated to Our Lady. So that, Our Lady of the Wayside, for the love of the infant Jesus you held in your arms, take us by the hand. So there's an acknowledgement in that prayer as a first principle that we need accompaniment by Our Lady. And that if she takes us by the hand, she always leads us to Christ. Also present, I think, as a first principle is we're not just a place of piety, we're also a place in which the whole person has to be formed. And at its best, Wayside has always striven to do that. Sometimes we miss the mark on one side or on the other side, but it's been a lodestone. People have known this. So it's not enough that our children just know how to pray, but it certainly is not enough if they just know how to be able to think. Both of those things come together and they mutually support each other. And that's a principle that I would always, those two things working in concert is something that I always hope. And I remember Our Lady, she didn't just, in Luke it says she didn't just know these things, but she took them into her heart and she pondered them. And there's actually, if you know me, you know I'd worked Newman into it somehow. So in one of his famous sermons, Newman says Mary's a type of the theologian by taking it into her heart and pondering. But it's also, Wayside helps kids to learn, whether they know it or not, to be contemplative in a way. It's a contemplative pondering. It's not some intellectual abstract game. And when they do that, I think Our Lady becomes very close to them, and I think it gives a chance for Christ to speak to them more intimately.
I don't know about anybody else, but I could listen to this panel all night long, but we will bring this to a close. I just want to invite all of you. So LeeAnn, Theresa, Dr. Beresford, Michele, Dr. Graham, and Sheridan, take a look at this room. None of us would be here if it were not for your work, if it were not for your dedication, if it were not for the many hours and the challenges, none of us would be here. So if I may invite the room to stand up and honor our founding families, please give them